a weekly MMA podcast. What a show do we have for you this week? And here to talk about it are none other than your two favorite Ukrainian hosts. I'm Jenny.
And I'm Dima. Guys, I'm telling you now, I wish this was our 20th episode, as the fights this past weekend were ridiculous. On this week's show, Top 25 finale, Justin Gaethje quickly becomes new favorite after spectacular debut. UFC 213, new champion crowned in the middleweight division after Yoel Romero and Bobby Knuckles go to war. All this and more on this week's edition of Shoot the Ones podcast.
I don't think he's a big fan of Bobby Knuckles, but we'll go with that. More like the Reaper. Before we get started, you can always find us on SoundCloud, YouTube, iTunes, Stitcher, MMApodcast.com, or anywhere the top podcasts are heard. Dima, this weekend was a blast. We had the Ultimate Fighter Redemption on Friday night, and on Saturday night we had UFC 213.
Indeed, Jenya. The MMA gods gifted us with a fantastic, all-around great fight weekend. It started off nice and slow with the top 25 finale, and then it graduated towards the pay-per-view where we saw finally a couple of conclusions, as far as middleweight division goes.
Yeah, man, this weekend we definitely got to see some prospects move forward, in the game. You're speaking specifically of Robert Whittaker and Justin Gaethje. But to start off, let's get into the tough redemption season. And I guess let's start off from the bottom. Gray Maynard picks up a win against Teruto Ishihara, also on this podcast known as My Beaches.
Yeah, man, My Bitches came in, and it was not a good fight for him because the old grizzled vet, Maynard, man, he took him to the takedown school. He did the classic Randy Couture. He put him on the fence. He put him down several times with, a couple of single doubles, and, just kind of put on a really grappling, heavy, smart, tactical performance, and, he dominated in his grappling.
Yeah, and it showed with 30-26s across the board.
Yep, pretty much he beat him in every single decision. He was able to take him down and maintain the top position, which won him the fight. Moving from the Fight Pass portion of things into the preliminary card on Fox Sports 1. The first match to start off the night was Tecia Torres and Juliana Lima.
She did, however, get her first submission victory in the UFC, which was really impressive. I think it's her first finish of her career, if I'm not mistaken. I'd have to double check on that.
You're correct, because they were saying that on the broadcast, and I kind of sarcastically texted you and said, "Yay, she's a finisher now." So it was good to see. She got the second round submission, rear naked choke, if I remember correctly. So good to see Tecia Torres moving up in the ranks.
Yeah, Dima. Albeit this is her first finish of her career, taking her to 9-1 overall. She is an impressive fighter with very good wins back in Invicta, and yeah, typically she does fight to a decision, but she's a good fighter, and she's up there, and she's going to compete with the top of 10 in that division. Yeah, after Tecia picked up her first submission of her career, we had a really good fight, Dima, between CB Dollaway and Ed Herman. This was really back and forth, and one of the better fights on the card.
Yeah, it was competitive. It was good matchmaking. It went back and forth. I believe they took each other down, and, if I'm trying to remember correctly, CB Dollaway took Ed Herman down in the first round, and I think he might have took the round there. Herman was able to land like a crazy combination on him in the second. I think he knocked him down. And in third, CB Dollaway kind of did the same thing he did in the first and was able to secure the takedown. Am I remembering this correctly?
Yeah, that's a pretty accurate play-by-play. I gave CB Dollaway the first round, and Herman came back with some strong punches at the beginning of round 2 and got Dollaway in some pretty bad positions where he was throwing elbows on the ground, and he had a really successful second round, and he looked like he had the momentum on his side, but CB Dollaway in the beginning of the third round came out real smart, took him down right away, got on his legs within 10 seconds of the round, and was able to dominate that round from the top position mostly.
Yeah, not the most, crowd-pleasing way to go. But hey, this is what the Doberman is known for. You know, he'll go in there. He's wrestling heavy. He will go take you down if you know you have any kind of weaknesses in your wrestling, and he will hold you there pretty much.
It's a tough way to earn victories, but he's damn good at it. Will be one of the best wrestlers to compete.
Yeah, that's true. And you know, this fight was competitive. So he definitely overcame adversity in second round and was
Mhm.
able to secure the win for him.
Yeah, kind of the same way Gray Maynard got his win earlier.
He grinded his opponent out.
Mm-hmm.
Moving into the next bout of the night, competitors from the series of The Ultimate Fighter. We have James Krause and Tom Galascio. That was it was a dogfight, man. Tom, the Toothless Tom, they like to call him. He was in there, but he took an ass whipping in the second and third round. But the first one was a little bit more competitive. It was a scrappy bout.
I agree. My co-host is kind of the king of butchering names a little bit, but his name is Galicchio. But James Krause versus Tom Galicchio, I thought was pretty much a blowout fight. James Krause, both of these guys were losers as semifinals on the show. Tom Galicchio lost to the eventual, or actually no, Tom Galicchio lost to Diego Lima, and James Krause lost to the eventual champion JT Money. So James Krause, he had a big advantage here in the striking, and he was able to use it throughout the fight and win 30-27s on all the cards.
To my defense, I do fuck up a lot of names, but I will not fuck up Kazushi Sakuraba's name like Todd Grisham did in the middle of the broadcast, who was basically Sakuraba was sitting in the crowd and the camera panned to him.
How did he say it?
He was like, "We have a Japanese legend inducted into the Hall of Fame, Saku." He was fucking it up, and then you could kind of tell the broadcast team was yelling in his ear, and he goes, "Kazushi Sakuraba." I'm sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen.
It's weird when like you got that kind of position and you don't know a legend like that. I could see that outrage a little bit.
But yeah. Other than that, this fight, I think I already spoke on it, man. It was a dog fight. Toothless Tom, I'll refrain from fucking up his last name anymore, so I'll just call him Galicchio. Okay, thank you. Yeah, man, it was a tough fight for him, and he was on that end of a lot of lanky, rangy strikes, which was tough for him to deal with.
Yeah, and he's a jiu-jitsu guy, and the other thing that he had trouble with in that fight was James Krause isn't bad at jiu-jitsu either, and he's pretty good at warding stuff off, and it wasn't in as much danger as the other tough competitors had with Tom Galicchio in that season. Moving right ahead, Angela Hill gets a win over Ashley Yoder, which was very impressive, Dima, because this looked to be her, best game plan strategy that I've seen from Angela Hill yet.
I think we saw textbook Angela Hill, but in a better and even more refined shape.
More strategic approach.
Yeah, I mean her Muay Thai the pace was good. She countered well. She moved around well. The pacing, like I said again, was good. And this was, I think, the best Angela Hill we've seen so far.
Yeah, Angela Hill came in as $3.50 favorite to Ashley Yoder. However, Ashley Yoder was a little bit slept on. She's got really good jiu-jitsu game. She's a tough girl, and Angela Hill was able to come up with a game plan to, keep the fight in her world and win a majority of the fight, which she did pretty successfully.
Yeah, I think when you're taller and you're able to use your reach and range well, it plays a big factor in a lot of fights. I think it plays in, John Jones, one of the tallest, lankiest fighters. I think he is the best because he is able to use that reach so well. And we're gonna talk about it a little bit later, but we're excited to see the DC and John Jones fight coming up. There's some good promos.
Oh yeah, man, those promos were dope, man. You wouldn't think UFC was gonna use all that footage that they did with John Jones being arrested and
they took it there.
Court. But yeah, they went in depth, and I think it's going to get people interested. And what I was texting you about earlier this week, which I thought was kind of cool, man, and I'm noticing from WIMG, is they got this media thing down, Dima. They know what they're doing with the media. That not only are they doing this, but like I was like, why they get Snoop Dogg, man? This doesn't make sense to me. But like I thought about it and thought about it, and like I looked at the commercial they kept playing for the Contender series, and my conclusion was Snoop Dogg is gonna, even though he's not a huge MMA fan and he's not bringing a lot of MMA knowledge, he's bringing with him a fan base.
Exactly, a lot of casuals. And I mean, these are
Yes.
all great talking points. I do want to get into a lot of all this later as we have our kind of talking point section and as well as some news sprinkled in. I do want to get back into this fight. Angela Hill, I don't want to take
No, I was veering off.
away from it.
I understand.
Let's steer back a little bit to this fight. Angela Hill is coming off of a win here. Where do you think it puts her? She's fought the who's who of the division. There's a lot to be said about her level of competition. Perhaps she was a little bit too green, as she said herself post-interview. But where do you see her fight next?
Well, this is a loss and a win now. One versus Andrade, and now a win versus Yoder. She called out Rose Namajunas. I'm not positive she's going to get that fight because Rose is pushing for the Joanna
Of
fight,
course.
which is a definite possibility as well. So I'm not sure where that puts Angela. Maybe somebody in Jessica Andrade's level. I don't think a rematch is necessarily warranted for that particular fight, but somebody near Jessica Andrade's level. Courtney Casey, maybe.
Perhaps Michelle Watterson would be a good potential matchup as well.
Yeah, either good choices. Doubtful that she gets Rose, but I think Courtney Casey coming off of suspension, or as you suggested, Michelle Watterson, are both good fights for Angela Hill at this point, who's shown a real improvement in her game.
Indeed, Janya. Moving into the main card portion on Fox Sports 1, the fight that really opened things up was light heavyweight Jordan Johnson defeat Marcel Fortuna.
Yeah, this was a good fight. To be honest with you, Dima, I was kind of in and out for this one a little bit, so I missed portions of it. I have been really impressed with Jordan Johnson and his size and his wrestling, primarily, which are impressive. And he's able to strike as a big guy, and I think that's what won him the fight, man. He was able to kind of show a little bit more heart than Fortuna and win the later round. And I think he won the first round and the third round.
Indeed, I wasn't all there for this fight myself. So yeah, I have that in common with you.
But I was attentive to the rest of the fights. Starting off with Brad Tavares versus Ilyas Theodorou, which was a damn close fight, Dima. Brad Tavares gets a decision that I didn't necessarily think he deserved.
Yeah, man, it was really, really close. And like you, it was hard to tell. It was I myself, I thought it was going to go in Elias Theodorou favor.
Yeah, I thought he was the much busier fighter, but this decision was unanimous. So sometimes you gotta, if a decision is unanimous, sometimes you gotta look at yourself and say, hey, maybe I'm missing something.
Maybe sometimes we are biased towards our betting picks.
That's also true. Sometimes you kind of count a little bit more for their punches than you do their opponents.
Regardless, it was a competitive fight. It was.
Speaking of betting picks, man, I got to brag again on Shoot the Ones, man. I only missed 3 fights this weekend, so I was pumped to come on here and talk about them.
Hey, man, I mean, I did pretty good myself. Granted, I used a lot of your picks, but I think the only one I missed was the main event that we're thrilled to talk about because, god damn it, it was definitely an instant contender for Fight of the Year.
I agree, man. That main event was the shit, man. I'm really excited to go over it here in a little while.
Yep, such eventful weekend. It's hard to stay on topic as we continue to veer off left and right. But another fight in the light heavyweight division. Jared Cannonier defeats Nick Roerick via TKO elbows in the very end of the fight, like third round there.
Yeah, before that fight, man, it had been a pretty long decision fest after Tisha Torres. But this was a good fight, man. Nick Roerick, he was supposed to be on that Contender Series, Dima. He came off and, he fought on pretty short notice against Jared Cannonier. and he looked a little bit like a fighter that deserved to be on the Contender Series and not in the UFC. And I'm not trash talking him. I just think that he's a guy that wasn't ready to take on Jared Cannonier in 3-4 days, as was the case when Jared Cannonier showed improvement in his movement, his striking. And what I did appreciate about this Nick Rourke kid, Dima, is it seemed like he had a clear strategy on how he was going to win the fight. It didn't work for him, but like you could tell his strategy. It was to volume punch and to kind of overwhelm Cannonier. It didn't really work.
I agree, and really difficult task to beat, a Terminator like Cannoneer essentially on 3-4 days notice. So it's a tall order, especially for up and comer and a developing fighter like Rorik. So I'm excited to see where both of them go from here. Cannoneer continues to make a good case for himself in this weight division. He had an interesting call out of Gokhan Saki there at the end of the fight, to which Saki kind of scoffed at, "Who is this guy calling me out?" on Twitter. Nonetheless, he's making some waves. He's making some call outs. He's doing all the right things.
I agree, and he has had a loss to Glover recently, but Glover's no joke, man, and he's definitely one of the toughest light heavyweights in the game. And to Nick Rourke's credit, man, he's a tough guy, man. He stayed in there. He took a lot of punches. He threw a lot of punches. He probably earned himself a callback, but he does not seem to be of the level that Cannonier and a lot of those guys at the top of light heavyweight are. He seems to be one of the lower guys in the division. Moving right ahead, what a fight we had next, man. This is maybe would have been the fight of the night if it wasn't for the main event. Drakkar Klose defeats Mark Diakasi by an odd split decision, man. It definitely should have been unanimous, but who cares, man? The right guy won. It was an awesome fight. What are your thoughts?
My thoughts on this fight, man, it was a good fight for Klose. I mean, he came in there and perhaps he was a bit of a too much challenge, too much too soon for Mark Diakasi, who a lot of people thought was going to be the favorite going into this fight.
Yeah, I was big on both of these people, and this is probably the episode where I'm going to pat myself on the back more than any episode we've had yet. But, man, I remember when we first announced this fight, I told people on this podcast, I said, do not sleep on Drakkar Klose. He's a hell of a fighter. He trains with Ben Henderson. He's got mean leg kicks, and he can wrestle his ass off. And his skill set was a little bit tough on Diakasi, who, let's face it, man, English fighters have had trouble grappling, in the wrestling department. We have had a few really good ones out of there, but for the most part, they're not as good yet. And I believe Diakasi is doing all the right things by going to, he is going to, train with Will Brooks, and he's doing all the right things, Dima. But, it's a tough task when you face a high-level wrestler like Drakkar Klose was in college, and it showed in this fight. And I feel that the leg kicks hurt Diakasi, and it really changed the fight, man. In the first round, he hit him with some leg kicks that just really changed his approach and made the fight a little bit easier for Klose.
Yeah, man. Now, in hindsight, this is kind of a precedent or a foreshadowing of what happened later. Because, man, leg kicks are slept on oftentimes. A very dangerous weapon that just can debilitate people in the very early stages of the fight. And you can't continue fighting, you can't continue moving right. You will shortly falter after that.
Yeah, leg kicks are a big part of the game, and the other thing I found interesting in a talking point is, man, the beef was real for Drakkar Klose.
Yeah, he was very emotional.
The fight was over, and he still wanted to get after him. He wanted to get in his face and say, "Hey, in your face, motherfucker! I whooped that ass, boy." That kind
All
of
English
shit.
fighters suck. That kind of stuff.
But with that said, Dima, these guys, they still have a place, man. They're both still big talents. I don't think either of their stocks dropped too much after this fight. Drakkar Klose's goes up a lot, But I don't think Diakasi falls too far down, man. I think he kind of stays put and fights another high-level guy next, and we'll see a little bit more of what he has to offer and what improvements he makes in his game.
Yeah, man. Both guys are young. The ceiling is high for both of them.
I agree, man. This was definitely a prospect versus prospect fight where two undefeated guys were going at it, and unfortunately, one guy had to lose.
Indeed. In the next bout, the tough finale, we saw Jesse Taylor defeat Diego Lima in a second round submission via rear naked choke.
I watched the whole season of The Ultimate Fighter this time, and Jesse Taylor he was the guy I was rooting for, Dima, because he had it tough, man. If you remember his season of Ultimate Fighter, he made it to the finals, but he didn't get to fight because he acted a damn fool.
Yep.
So his redemption story was probably bigger than anybody. Dana sat him in a room and was like, "What's wrong with you, man? You're not gonna be able to fight for us. You got mental issues. You're a loose cannon." To that, he didn't say exactly those words, but it was to that extent. You know what I mean? And to see this guy not only get better, we saw like now he's a grizzled vet, and what has he got, like 50 fights now, 51 fights. And he took some hard losses outside of the UFC, man. We saw him take some knocks, and we kind of kept up with his career. And Diego Lima's a really nice guy, good guy, had a good fight with Ricky back in the day. But I really wanted Jesse Taylor to win, man, and it was a good redemption story for the season of tough redemption.
Exactly. I mean, the title of the season, Redemption, just fits the bill. It fits the story perfectly here with Jesse. As you said, he has a crazy story. He has a tough comeback. He comes from another season of tough. Didn't make the show, didn't make the cut, and had a crazy career outside of UFC, where he was, is what we like to call, a traveling fighter there for a minute. Fought
Yeah.
several different organizations and, did his thing. So it's good to see him come in and finally get some shine, get some money, and, really put a exclamation point on his career there.
Well said, Dima. You want to talk about this crazy main event?
Speaking of exclamation point, I think this puts exclamation point on the whole weekend. I mean, the debut of Justin Gaethje lived up to every single bit of the hype we had going into this.
Yeah, man. It was everything it was billed to be, Dima. Gaethje, he's made a name for himself in World Series of Fighting as being just this highlight kid that goes out there and he takes knocks, but he comes forward and he's super aggressive. And you wanted to see if he was going to bring that style against Michael Johnson, and that's exactly what he did. And Gaethje's never been in a boring fight, and this was definitely fight of the night.
Fight of the night, perhaps fight of the year. Man, it was a barn burner. It was everything that we as MMA fans, clamor for, and this is the type of shit that we get excited about. Like you said, there was a lot of questions about Justin Gaethje, if he was able to keep up these crazy berserker-like performances going into UFC, and this fight, for sure answered every single question. Yes, he can do it. He can hang in there with the best. He can continue his way of fighting, this reckless, almost Vanderlei Silva-like style. And, he was able to come out with a victory over a high caliber opponent like Michael Johnson.
I agree, Dima, and you bring up a good point, and this is what I loved about it, man. Justin Gaethje did like they respected what he did outside of the UFC, so he came in there and got a serious contender. I mean, Michael Johnson's not the best the UFC has to offer at lightweight, but he's got some serious skills, as you highlighted on the last show, and that showed in this fight. I mean, he almost finished Gaethje twice himself. This was a real back and forth barn burner, man. But Gaethje that's his style. He takes shots to give them, and his wrestling is superb. So he doesn't have to worry about the other guys wrestling too much. And he's got really good arsenal of striking. He's got great leg kicks. He's got an uppercut. He's got good hands. He's an interesting opponent for a lot of UFC fighters. I mean, let's talk about this fight first, but then let's talk about kind of how he matches up with the other guys in this division, because he's obviously probably going to get a top 5 opponent next, beating the number 5 guy. And, having so much hype around his name, he probably gained a lot of casuals in that fight alone.
Sure. The matchup itself went a little bit surprising. I off the bat, Michael Johnson came over the top with a right and caught him with a very good counter. Gaethje just shrugged it off in typical Justin Gaethje style and continued plodding forward. He began opening up with his leg kicks, which, as I mentioned earlier, is you know a crucial part of his strategy. I believe he had several leg kick TKOs in prior organizations, so it's one of his more dangerous weapons. He kicks the shit out of your legs. So he started chopping away the legs, and then at the end of the first round, Michael Johnson caught a really clean counter. I think he landed a left hook on him, was able to take Justin Gaethje down, and had him really, really hurt there towards the end. Despite that, Gaethje being the warrior he is, went back into his corner like nothing happened, and came out the second round like that knockdown or didn't even happen. Now, the second round is where the story began to change a little bit. The momentum began shifting in Justin Gaethje's favor as he kept pushing forward, kind of in a very similar fashion to how we saw Michael Johnson and Nate Diaz fight. Nate continued pushing forward, and Michael Johnson is not as good, off of his back feet, making fast decisions when he's being pushed with such pace as he is when he gets to dictate the distance and his counters. So that in combination with the leg kicks, it really started wearing him down. And despite him landing on Gaethje and rocking him one more time in the second round, if I'll recall correctly, this is where Gaethje started to put a hurting on him.
That he did, Dima, and this was an impressive victory for Gaethje, not without risk like all of his fights.
Yeah, there's some criticism. I did not think Michael Johnson was going to engage in such a crazy brawl. Like this, he played exactly into Justin Gaethje's favorite strategy, and he got caught in that honey trap, so to speak. Justin Gaethje, man, he takes a lot of risks, and of course, he took a lot of shots. He got countered all day by some things that Michael Johnson's really good at. That left counter, I think he ate a couple of uppercuts too. So, you know, it's exciting as shit. But how long is that kind of performance and ability to take punishment? How long that's going to continue for? That remains to be answered. And Gaethje is conscious of it. He says, my clock is running out, considering this is the way that I fight. So it's it's crazy to see, and enjoy it while it's here, folks, because this is something special.
I agree, and he definitely, like you said, he admits such. But he also admitted that he's a promoter's wet dream in that same interview, and he's a real special character, man. He comes in there and he's gonna swing and bang, as Derek Lewis likes to say. And Michael Johnson, man, he brought his A game. You could tell that's what he wanted to do. But like what you were talking about, bring a more composed strategy, not brawl. But that's just the fight that Gaethje drags people into. And I was kind of surprised I was able to get him at an underdog line. I remember texted you when I got him at plus 140. I was like, oh man, I feel like I'm stealing money. And it did kind of end that way. I know I've been patting myself on the back a lot this episode. This is maybe the third time. Nevertheless, there were a few times in this fight where he could have also gone down, which you pointed out as well.
Yep, I mean, he's got the granite chin. It's keeps him moving forward. It keeps him putting such pressure on his opponents that they don't have enough time to react, and that definitely played a part in his ability to draw Michael Johnson into this brawl that he excels in.
Very well said, and that was a hell of a main event, man. It's going to be hard to beat that. The UFC stayed in the same arena, the T-Mobile Arena in Nevada, for another event. It got double attendance. It was UFC 213 on Saturday.
Yep, the Las Vegas got to see a back-to-back with the UFC.
Yeah, they were really lucky, but at the same time, it was unfortunate. We did have a new main event, and the main event fell through.
Yep, not without some controversy. Unfortunately, Amanda Nunes was out very last minute against her fight with Valentina Shevchenko, which both me and Zhenya were very excited to see. I think this was going to be one of the highest technical women fight matchups in
Maybe ever.
history of women's fighting, perhaps. However, we did get to see another main event that was, it lived up to all the hype, expectation, and it was definitely a worthy main event.
Yeah, we had some fun fights we'll get into right after talking about why the main event fell out. But Amanda Nunes did release a statement, Dima, and she said it was chronic sinusitis, which is basically a fancy word for sinuses. And I wanted to give her the pass so bad because this girl is tough. She's never pulled out of a fight. And what I do appreciate is that this fight is still going to happen. Dana White's kind of pissed. He's not going to do a main event again, he says, with Amanda Nunes, which let's see. Dana bluffs a lot. He's a promoter, so his part of his job is to lie. But at the same time, this really was hard for me, man. I was really excited, as you said, about this fight, and hear that she pulled herself out due to something that I've struggled with my whole life, and that you could probably get over, and that she was cleared by the UFC doctors. It's disappointing, man. It's really disappointing. I think it's Shevchenko's time, and I thought that she had a good chance of capturing the belt. But I respect Amanda Nunes. I respect her game a lot. I think she's one of the top 4 females in the game. But I'm excited about this rematch. I'm disappointed it didn't happen.
Yeah, likewise, I'm disappointed. I did want to see Valentina Shevchenko get another crack at Amanda Nunes, this time in a different format, that being a 5-round fight for the championship belt. This is likely going to be a rematch, and they will, schedule it down the road, perhaps fall. So, I don't know.
But I want to get started with the card, man. We had a lot of exciting fights, and starting off the preliminary card had really impressive victories from Trevin Giles and Cody Stamann, Dima. Especially Trevin Giles, who was especially impressive.
Yeah, very impressive showing from Trevin Giles. Defeats James Bokanovic in second round via TKO punches.
Yeah, Dima, this was really impressive. Trevin Giles came out of Legacy Fighting, and he was their middleweight champion. And this fight was at light heavyweight because a lot of these guys on the preliminary card, actually all of these guys, they all took fights on really short notice. And James Bokanovic, who I probably butchered his names, but James trains with Ben Rothwell, so he was also, undefeated prospect, and Trevin Giles gave him that work, Dima. He was, his wrestling was too much, and he was doing some innovative stuff, like throwing fake right elbow and hitting him with the left elbow. It was really impressive.
Nice, man. I'm not going to fake the funk. I did not happen to catch the UFC Fight Pass, but I did start watching around the Bilal Muhammad Jordan Main fight. So if you want to add anything about the Cody Stamann Tyrion Ware fight.
Yeah, not a ton, Dima, but Cody Stamann and Tyrion Ware were those rare UFC debutants who had a ton of experience. Both guys did, and probably both deserve to be in the UFC for a while. These guys fought at featherweight. Next fight for both guys will be at flyweight. And Stamann showed a solid advantage in his game over Tyrion Ware, just being kind of the quicker fighter and, having good striking skills as well, training with Darren Kirkshank. However, Tyrion Ware did get an advantage of him in part of the fight with the stand-up. And like you said, right after that fight, Bilal Muhammad defeated Jordan Mean 29-28, 29-28, and 30-27.
Yeah, man, it was a pretty competitive fight. This was a pretty tough fight for Bilal Muhammad coming into it, and he was able to overcome another challenge.
I agree, Dima, and I had picked Bilal Muhammad in this fight, but what was impressive about him in this fight is He started off pretty even between him and Jordan Maine at the beginning, but he realized that he needed to change his strategy, and he was able to in game, in fight, change his strategy and really pressure Maine and make the fight really uncomfortable for Maine, where he showed to be a better grinder than Jordan.
Yeah, he was able to outposition him, and ultimately towards the end, I think the slow grind. He was able to impose his will there and ultimately come out with a win. Moving into the next bout, in the middleweight division, Thiago Santos defeats Gerald Meerschaert via TKO punches in the second round.
This was a fun fight, Dima. Thiago came in with this new huge tattoo of a hammer on his chest, and you got to be a badass to have a hammer on your chest like that. And Gerald Meerschaert was a true veteran, with a lot of respect, a very respected jiu-jitsu game. And you knew the strategy coming into this one was Thiago Santos wanted to bang, while Meerschaert wanted to get it in his jiu-jitsu game. And you can appreciate the growth in Santos's game. He was able to get in some uncompromising positions by Meerschaert on the ground, and he was able to use his athleticism to kick off and escape all those positions.
Yep, you summed it up. Every time he was in a situation that was in trouble, he got himself out of there pretty fast, and ultimately got the better of his opponent with the strikes.
And proved to still, have a very dangerous punching game and get a lot of knockouts, man. This guy is a scary, scary puncher, man, with a lot of knockouts to his name and a real highlight reel.
Yeah, and he's been around for a minute too.
Well said, man. It's nice to see his game evolving. Moving ahead, man, we had a welterweight fight where I don't know about you, Demo, but I wasn't expecting Brian Camozzi to have such a huge size advantage over Chad Laprise. But Laprise was able to still get the victory here.
Yeah, I think that was the only advantage he had throughout the whole fight was the size.
Yeah, I thought he won the second round, though.
It was more competitive than we initially thought, but man, we kind of we've shitted on Camozzi before, kind of unfairly so.
Yeah, I don't think we've been overly impressed with either Camozzi's skills, but I thought Camozzi was able to use his size very well and win the second round after losing the first to Laprise, and Laprise came out in the third with that nasty body shot, man, and you could tell he'd been practicing, and he told Joe after the fight he'd been practicing that body shot, and it was game over after that, and it shut down, liver shot. He hit him perfect in the liver, and it shut down Camozzi's body. But I do give Camozzi credit. He was a more game opponent than I expected, and Laprise was the biggest favorite on this card. So he was expected to win.
Yeah, Boss Rutan would approve it. The liver shot is the other knockout button. The interesting thing about this was he hit him on the liver with his right hand, which is kind of the opposite side, because typically you go to the liver with a left hook. So the way he did it was interesting. And yeah, Joe did give him props after that in his post-fight interview. Moving into the next bout of the night in heavyweight division, Alexei Oleinik defeats Travis Brown via rear naked choke. Well, it was kind of a weird choke, but let's go a rear naked choke for now. In the second round, kind of a trend here with second round finishes, huh?
Yeah, to start off, I agree completely that it was a weird choke. But Alexei Oleinik is known for weird chokes, man. He's probably got the most varied arsenal of chokes in the MMA game, especially at heavyweight. But this was a fight Travis Brown was supposed to win, man. This fight has a ton of talking points because Travis Brown came out looking pretty good. He looked like some of that, training he'd been doing outside of Edmond been helping. However, something I noticed, Dima, and something that I find bothersome to him, this is 4 losses in a row, which what I find even more troublesome than that, Dima, is he really now, when he gets hit hard, like the whole fight turns for him. It's basically what Derek Lewis called him out for. Like when he gets hit hard, he gets the baby deer legs. It might just be from being tall, being like 6'8", but when he gets rocked in a fight, it changes the game for him, man. He's never the same. He can never get his feet under him and throw his athletic strikes. he's not the same fighter after he gets clipped. And Alexei Olenek, to his credit, was able to clip him. Even being the, super impressive grappler that Alexei is, what's he got? 60 wins now with 10 losses. Probably even more than that. I think this is the 63rd win with
Yeah,
10
just
losses.
a grizzled vet, man. I mean, as seasoned as they come. His resume is impressive, but that aside, he lives up to his nickname like no other fighter. He has one of the most diverse, crazy submission arsenal, and he is nicknamed the Boa Constrictor. So, we saw him pull off like the historic first Ezekiel choke in MMA, being on the bottom, mounted
In the UFC.
in the UFC.
Yeah, he'd done it many times outside of the UFC, actually, too.
Indeed, he's done it standing, I believe, against the cage, which he was trying to set that up in the clinch against the cage a couple of times against Travis. He kept kind of doing the can opener on him. He was just doing a lot of weird things. Like, this guy is a unique grappler.
Yeah, another talking point I took out of this is Travis Brown, man, his career has gone downhill since he left Greg Jackson. It's been rough. And where does he go from here, Dima?
I mean, I think he stays around just because I think
He's got that Rousey connection.
not only that, but I mean, he's fought though, dude. He's fought the toughest of the tough fights. I mean, he's lost to, like Canes, and you're he basically. I think he gets another shot because of the calibers of opponents he fought.
I see exactly what you're saying. I'm even sitting here thinking of some of these wins he had, man, and they've been super impressive. Before this recent run of just getting his ass kicked, I mean, he was able. I think Bigfoot fight after Bigfoot fight it changed, but he was able to knock out Barnett real impressively. Overeem, really respected guys in the MMA game, and he looked like a possible future champion. And since I hate to call it this, but since the whole Ronda Rousey thing and moving with Edmund, it's been downhill from there. His game hasn't progressed. He hasn't looked like the champion material. In fact, a lot of holes in his game have been exposed. Where do you think he goes from here? I know Dana was calling for him to retire. I'm not a fan of telling a guy to retire, but he's gotta restart somewhere. He's got to figure things out, or pick something else to do.
He fought Skyscraper before.
Yeah, he knocked him out in very impressive fashion.
Yeah, that was
where Stefan Struve went for one of those flying knees. I think that was still in the phase of Stefan Struve's career where he was learning. Maybe throwing flying knees isn't the best thing for me.
Rematch with Derek Lewis.
Did you see that tweet that I texted you?
Yeah.
Derek Lewis said after he said keep his name out his mouth. These guys really don't like each other.
That's why I said. I mean, there's legit beef between the two.
And both coming off of losses.
Both saying disrespectful shit to each other. Yeah, maybe.
Very well.
Winnable fight, for both of them.
I agree. And moving ahead, man, the main card was pretty fun, man. Like you said, the main event, man, we got a ton to talk about there. But starting off at bantamweight, Rob Font had a super impressive performance versus Douglas Silva de Andrade, who's no slouch, man. His Muay Thai game is pretty solid. But Rob Font was able to show a lot of improvements in his game.
Yeah, man, it was a very impressive performance from Rob Font. He came in there, he was dominant in a lot of aspects of the fight. He came in and imposed his will, and ultimately in the second round got that guillotine choke, which was pretty clean.
Yeah, I agree, man. There weren't too many moments where Douglas Silva de Andrade had success. And when he strapped on that guillotine choke, he showed that he had a really impressive choke, and he was able... he grabbed it, he knew he had it, and he got slammed by de Andrade, and he never let go of the choke, which was really impressive. He was real confident in it and was able to finish de Andrade and get a really impressive win in the bantamweight division.
For sure. In the next fight, Jim Miller welcomed Anthony Pettis back to the lightweight division in what was back and forth fight at first, but ultimately Anthony Pettis showed why he was the ex-champion of multiple organizations, and put on a pretty good textbook Anthony Pettis performance.
Yeah, vintage Anthony Pettis, and I'm glad to see him back at lightweight. This is where he belongs. You could tell, he was having a ton of trouble getting down to 145, and you finally got to see the Anthony Pettis that you're used to, and maybe it was the speed difference with him and Jim Miller. He was able to utilize that speed difference and pretty much win every round versus Jim Miller. But you're always going to get a fun fight with either of these guys, Anthony Pettis or Jim Miller, man. They're two of the, gritty veterans that we love in this game, and, they always bring it. There's not a fight I can remember that wasn't fun with either guy.
Yeah, man. I was just going back and looking at Anthony's record yesterday, day before yesterday, and getting hyped for this fight. And I was like, man, I've been watching this guy fight since I think 2009, 2010, around the time WC got bought and he came into the fold with the UFC. But even before that, that impressive fight with Benson he had where he threw that kick. Anyways, I'm just reminiscing. You said he's a veteran, and like Jim Miller.
No, I completely agree, man. Pettis is, he's been around, and what I appreciate about his game is even in the loss to Holloway, he always brings it, and he's got a complete arsenal. He's good everywhere, man. His jiu-jitsu is scary. His striking is really good, and he's all around, and it gave Jim a ton of problems in this fight.
So mainly what I was trying to say is it's really good to see Anthony Pettis back in his form. He's not killing himself to get to a lower weight class, and this is kind of a trend. A lot of people are learning more about weight cutting and aren't putting themselves in such positions to where they're fighting slightly diminished because of the weight cut.
Yeah, Pettis even said as such after the fight in the interview. He said, "Hey, if you're a fighter out there, fight at your natural weight class. There's no need to, kill yourself to get to the weight class where you have a huge advantage, or perceived huge advantage, rather." Great fight. Coming up, man, we had two heavyweight fights that didn't bring the same kind of heat as Anthony Pettis versus Jim Miller, man. They weren't as good of fights, but we'll still highlight them a little bit. Curtis Blades got a pretty obvious decision victory over Daniel Omalenchik. However, that was a really boring fight, Dima. There wasn't a whole lot of impressive times. Curtis Blades was able to win mostly off of like a Randy Couture type strategy of being a better wrestler and he never got the takedown. He was stuffed 9 times, but he was able to get him in the grinding on the fence positions throughout the fight, and that's how he won, by better position and better position time.
I couldn't have said it better myself. It was not the most exciting and definitely got the crowd anxious, but I do want to highlight Daniel's ability to prevent the takedown. I think that was very impressive considering Blady's, he's still a little bit of green coming in the division, but he's a big dude. I mean, he was in his last fights, he pretty handily took down his competition, except for maybe Francis, who's another freak of nature on his own.
Yeah, it was unexpected, especially considering he took out his last opponent, Milstead, 8 out of 8, and 0 for 9 versus Daniel Omalenchik, and probably something a young fighter like Blades has to get in his career. Feel some adversity in there. He can't just go in there and run through everybody. Nevertheless, he's an impressive prospect that we should still keep an eye out for.
Exactly, and he's staying humble. He got on there and he said he's got a lot of things to learn. He's got ways to go, and he's just coming up and doing his thing, and he taking it slow, still learning a lot, and it's refreshing to see. He's not, it was a slow fight.
Yeah, I agree. It was a slow fight and not the most exciting fight.
In the next heavyweight bout, Alistair Overeem defeats Fabricio Verdum in what was a pretty close decision fight. This was their third in the series, kind of a rubber match, right?
Yes, this was their trilogy, Dima, and that kind of made for a boring fight, you know what I mean? And I hate using that word because guys give it their all. They train their asses off for these fights, and boring is not a good descriptive word. But I expected more. However, due to the aura of these guys, it was still somewhat exciting, but I feel like they knew each other's games really well, and it made for a more tentative fight.
Tentative is more of a term I'd be cool with. I don't think it was a boring fight. I think their second fight was a lot more boring because there was a lot more shenanigans in there. Lots more flopping from Verdum, inviting the ground game, which
I
never happened.
I agree, man. Both these guys know each other real well. So Overeem knew the spots that he couldn't get during the fight, and Verdum knew the spots where he didn't want to get. And what was able to happen was they were able to kind of speed up the action in the second round. So, like you said, the fight did kind of gain some excitement. Verdum was even able to almost finish him in the third round.
I see where you come from, though. Like, the first round was probably a round where Verdum was kicking himself over in the head for, because I think both guys threw like under 10 strikes each.
It was 11.
Combined?
Seven for Verdum and 4 for Overeem.
See, it was 11 combined strikes. So how do you judge that when Verdum lands, lots of kicks? He lands like 2 solid body kicks, and Overeem, even though he lands less shots, he lands 2 to the head, 2 good ones to the head. So that's a weird one. I think I'll go with 2 shots to the head, and that's a little bit more significant to me, and that's just my opinion.
I agree, and maybe I'm harsh, Dima, because Alistair is one of my favorite fighters by far, and you know this. You know I'm a huge fan of Alistair.
Yeah, and I'm not. I'm just seeing it objectively, actually.
That's fair, and I'm rarely a fan of many fighters. I've always kept up with him. He's one of those guys that has 50 fights, so he's got a long library of fights that is, when you keep up with a guy for that long, you kind of appreciate what he does. And same for Verdum. This was a fight between what I consider legends, and you knew it was gonna bring the heat. And like I texted you immediately after this fight, man, people are gonna be upset about the decision either way. It was such a close fight; could have gone really either way. That first round, like you said, what the heck do? You score 7 on this side, 4 on this side, but the 4 punches from Overeem seemed to be more effective than the 7, and he got a takedown. It's like little variables like that do play a little bit of a role. He didn't do anything off that takedown, but hey, he got a takedown. It was a round with barely any offense.
Yeah. So this first one is gonna go down to be the disputed one. Second round, not so much. I mean, second round, he turns up the heat and starts,
He being Overeem, right?
he being Overeem, he starts giving it to Verdum. He starts putting together more combinations. He opens up and lands on Verdum, knocks him down several times. Verdum pulls a guard after he's in trouble, I think once or twice during this, and then the tables turn in a third where Verdum is able to land something really clean on Overeem and end the round in the top position.
Yeah, he landed that clean knee on him. However, Dima, did you think he made a mistake when I think there was 2 minutes left in that round, third round, and Overeem had gotten a little bit of the better of the first 2 rounds, possibly the first round, like we said, and definitely the second round. He had him in a ton of trouble, and instead of going for the knockout, Dima, he went back to what he's used to, and he got in the top position. He grappled where Overeem was able to kind of hold him for the rest of the round, and it ruined the opportunity that Verdum had to finish the fight.
Yes, after he had him in trouble, after he rocked him, essentially, he chose to take Overeem down instead of continue the onslaught. So to answer your question, yes, I think that was a mistake, but at the same time, I'm not Fabricio Verdum. I don't know where his energy levels were at the time, so...
And he might have thought he won the first round, but
maybe
you can't really, as a fighter, bank on that. If you got an opportunity to finish your guy like he did there, you kind of got to. I mean, maybe it was a controversial decision, whatever, but he kind of lost the right to bitch because he had a great opportunity there to finish him, and he chose to grapple, even though he may be the best grappler to ever compete at MMA and definitely in the heavyweight division. I personally take Maya as the best MMA guy, but nevertheless, to my point, he's definitely the best heavyweight jiu-jitsu player to ever compete.
it was a dope fight, nonetheless. It was a very close fight, and it was one of those that A lot of people don't want to see fights go beyond the rubber match, the trilogy. This is a fight that could happen again a year or so down the road, and
Ooh.
no, you don't want to see it.
No thanks, man. I am all right with Overeem Verdum 4. I think it's very unnecessary.
Just to put a little more of a conclusion on it, because look, UFC judging, Overeem takes this 2-1. I think Pride judging, the way it ends, it plays a lot into how the fights are scored. And I know we don't, I don't want to live in a good old era of Pride, but I always considered their way of judging fights to be a little bit more accurate to how fights should be judged.
Dima, this is not Bellator, man. People do not want to see guys fight 4 and 5 times.
But they're in good form, dude. They're not old and past their prime.
Their last 2 fights, they went more off of the aura of who they were. They're real tentative around each other. They respect each other's games a ton. I really just don't want to see these guys fight 100 times, and I think I would venture to guess, and I would dare say I'm right, that you are in the very small minority of people that want to see a Overeem Verdum 4.
Well, hey, write to us.
Handful of people.
And let us know how you feel, because, hey, I mean, I don't think the way this fight played out and ended, it was like almost a draw.
I might want to see Whitaker Romero too. I don't want to see Verdum versus Overeem 4. No way. And I would venture to say most fans are with me on that one. I would venture to guess.
It's cool to have difference of opinion.
Absolutely, man. That's always fun.
Speaking of Robert Whitaker and Yoel Romero, what a main event did that make?
I enjoyed it, man. It was a hell of a fight. One of the best fights of the night. I think Romero definitely hurt him when it changed to a 5-rounder, because he was able to get the advantage the first 2 rounds. I believe it was the first round, Demo, where he hit Robert with one of those kicks John Jones uses to the knee.
Yep.
And kind of messed up Robert Whitaker's knee for the rest of the fight, pretty much. What was impressive, Dima, is he was able to kind of get his game back, even with the leg messed up, and outlast Romero and prove that he's got the better cardio and show an impressive takedown defense game in this fight.
Yeah, man. I mean, what a warrior Robert Whitaker is. Despite having a bummed knee, he was able to overcome the adversity. He was able to overcome the onslaught that Yoel Romero brought in the first 2 rounds. And Yoel Romero was so tired, he took a round off there during third, and it was kind of crazy to see. He pretty much made it blatant that he was going to conserve his energy until another round. So he kind of started giving away, and he started showing signs, giving Robert Whitaker the signs that, hey, the momentum is now swinging in your favor. Make something of it, which Robert Whitaker did.
Those are interesting talk points, and I remember I told you prior to the fight that part of the way Romero fights is he kind of lets his opponent have success before, really giving it to him. But he's a little bit older competitor. He's not used to the 5 rounds. And something about Robert Whitaker that I really have learned to appreciate, and I'm sure that there's only a handful of people, like, you had the opinion of people that want to see Overeem Verdum 4. Probably only a handful of people believe that Whitaker was actually going to be a champ one day. When he was on the tough smashes, he looked like a okay prospect with good hands. He had a mediocre welterweight run, but he's looked unstoppable at middleweight, man. And I would never think I would say this, but I would favor Robert Whitaker even over Gegard Mousasi. I probably favor him over Bisping.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's stylistically a terrible matchup for Bisping, because essentially he is Bisping, but he does everything better, and he's younger and a little bit faster and a little bit less wear and tear. You're right in that sense that everybody slept on him. I think I slept on him until the Bronson fight, and then going into the Jacare fight, I thought this was going to be very interesting, but it was going to be a very dangerous fight for him. But as soon as I saw how great his takedown defense was, the improvement in that field, That kind of really opened up my eyes to how dangerous and well-rounded of a fighter he has grown to be.
Yeah, on this recent run of success for him, man, he's kind of shown Dima to be a master game plan and strategist. Once you say he came in against Jacare and he was fully prepared for the jiu-jitsu. He knows he's going to get in those positions. Like he went against Romero, in my opinion, by far the best wrestler at middleweight and probably the best wrestler in MMA, barring maybe Daniel Cormier. Just like along with accomplishments outside of the UFC, he's the most accomplished actually.
And the way he uses his wrestling is mostly defensive, which lends in the sprawl and brawl style of the fight he brings, because he's really accurate with his punches. So it plays into that excellently.
Whitaker was able to defend all of Romero's, not all of his takedowns. He was taken down in the fight, you know what I mean? But he showed that he's able to defend Yoel Romero's best takedowns. And he made like a little bit, Romero was a little bit too unpredictable for himself, you know? He was giving Whitaker his success, like you said, but he would find himself in uncompromising positions. Like one time I remember he was on his knees, just standing there eating punches from Whitaker. And Whitaker was basically able to outclass him the last 3 rounds with the hands. And I kind of disagree with you about Bisping. I don't think that it's a complete blowout match. You know what I mean? I respect Bisping a lot. And I think that he's the one advantage he has over Whitaker is he's a little bit better of a pressure fighter. However, they both, this might be the best striking matchup that I could possibly think of at middleweight. Maybe Gegard up there too is a really good striker at middleweight, but other than that, these two are probably the best. And it makes for a really interesting fight. Is Bisping going to be able to pressure Whitaker and make him have mistakes? Whitaker being the master game planner that he is, you know, is he going to be completely ready for Bisping's game like he was Romero and Yacare's?
He's got some healing to do. You know, he's got a injury to tend, but man, this is just gonna be tough. I think in trying to avoid Yoel Romero fight, Michael Bisping earned himself a fight that's even tougher than Yoel Romero, because now essentially you have a person that knocked him off the rankings with a bumped knee.
Yeah, I don't think Michael Bisping ever avoided a Romero fight. I mean, it's probably no secret that.
Well, he preferred the GSP to the Romero fight.
Yeah, and actually, to Bisping's credit, he's called many times on his podcast that Robert Whitaker would take out Romero. With that said, I do think Romero is a little bit tougher opponent for Bisping, and you got to give Romero his credit. He won those first 2 rounds. If it was a 3-round fight, he would have won that fight. You know, maybe Romero's not made for 5-rounders. It kind of the 5-round main event is not a thing that benefits a guy like Yoel. However, Robert Whitaker is a heck of a prospect, man. He keeps impressing people, you know what I mean? He got his leg hurt, but he was able to come back, weather the storm of Yoel Romero, and really dominate in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th rounds, getting a really impressive victory.
Yeah, man. One thing I do like about this is pretty much no controversy. The whole world saw it as the same. You know, Yoel Romero first 2, Robert Whitaker, aka Bobby Knuckles, takes last 3 as the momentum swings in the 3rd round. Yoel gets tired, you know, starts coasting a little bit, and Robert Whitaker cranks on. The heat continues, you know, plodding forward, defending the takedown, starts landing the better shots, and yeah, man, what a war. I mean, we were treated to some really good fights this weekend.
I agree, man, and I wouldn't be too shocked if you saw a rematch of this in the future. You know, Romero's not going to fall too far down the rankings. We might see a Whitaker Romero too, man. This was that good of a fight. And this weekend, man, the main events really delivered, huh, Dima?
Yeah, man, just, you know, both cards really brought the heat, and like I said in our intro, I kind of wish we got to talk about all of this in our big 20 episode, but it's all good. Our 21 is going to be pretty strong.
21. But getting back to the podcast, man. We're kind of lucky, man. We had 2 weeks in a row with really good MMA, man. And this UFC 213 card was really solid. Tough had a great, main event, and parts of that card were really exciting. Overall, man, the weekend, I would give it a A. It would be an A plus if we had Shevchenko Nunez.
Yep. Fortunately, we get to see that fight down the road. I don't know exactly when. Nothing official yet, but they're gonna do it. Something tells me that it's gonna happen.
Yeah, we were really lucky to get treated to 2 great weeks of MMA in a row. I would give this weekend a little bit of the edge, but last weekend was a blast, with Bellator 180 as well. Right after this break, we're going to go over UFC Fight Night 113, Nelson versus Ponzinibbio.
Hey guys, do you like to chat? Join me in Morning Chat with Dim, my other show from Shoot the Ones podcast, where we discuss a variety of topics in a more laid-back, live chat format. We can be found on the same YouTube channel as our show, or PlayStation 4 if you're a gamer. Rise and shine in the mornings with Dim, on Mondays and Wednesdays. Welcome back, you bad motherfuckers, as we go into UFC Fight Night 113, Nelson versus Ponzinibbio.
Yeah, man, this has a really good main event, but this is a risky fight for Gunnar Nelson, going against a really good striker and a good fighter overall in Ponzinibbio.
Yeah, guys, we're not going to get into the whole review of the card, but we are eager to talk about a few of the matchups here in particular, most of them off of the main card.
Yeah, I agree. There's a couple of really exciting fighters on this card that we would like to highlight, but we're not going to be monotone in talking about the whole card, especially considering there's some fighters that we don't know a ton about.
Indeed. I'm interested about Khalil Roundtree, Paul the Bear Jew Craig. I think that's going to be an interesting matchup.
Yeah, there's some interesting names on here, man. Like, you get to see David Timur's brother, Pantojo's on the preliminary card. Like you said, Khalil Roundtree versus the Bear Jew is on this card. But, a ton of the fights aren't overly impressive besides at the very top of the card.
So we'll get right into that with lightweight divisions, Stevie Ray versus Paul Felder.
Yeah, that's a good one to start off with. That's a good fight between strikers. Stevie Ray's showing an ever-improving game, and Paul Felder's got one of the most dangerous Muay Thai games in MMA, training there with Donald Cerrone. Maybe a stretch to say in MMA, but he is one of the best strikers in that division at least. I favor Stevie Ray slightly in this fight, but man, this is really a toss-up fight, and anybody could win.
Just looking at the record of the both, Stevie Ray is impressive, coming off of a 2-fight win streak against Joe Lozon, being one, Rose Pearson.
And prior to that, he got dominated by that jiu-jitsu guy.
Patrick. Indeed. Paul Felder, on the other hand, is an impressive up-and-comer with a very diverse striking game and an impressive showing in his last fight against Alexandro Ricci, where he finished the fight with elbows and punches via very first round.
Yeah, Ricci's a little bit lower ranked opponent than Stevie Ray, but Felder was able to finish him in super impressive fashion and hit him with everything but the kitchen sink pretty much.
That aside, in the Francisco Trinaldo loss, he has wins over Josh Berkman and Darren Cruikshank, who are both worthy competitors.
Yeah, I like this fight, man. I think it's a really good fight. It's going to be unpredictable. It's going to be a good class striking affair. It's going to be a fun fight to watch.
Yeah, man. These guys is what makes lightweight divisions one of the most deep, shark-infested waters as far as weight classes go.
Yeah, that's a heck of a fight, Dima. I'm looking forward to it, man. Can't wait. Right after then is another can't-miss fight. Joanne Calderwood fighting in her hometown of Scotland is taking on the female Diego Sanchez. I mean, this girl, how can you not love Cynthia Calvillo, who just brings it? You know, she bites down on her mouthpiece, and she's just real aggressive, man. She's good everywhere. She really wants to grapple with you more than anything. And Calderwood, before losing to Andrade, who's really tough in her own right, was on an impressive streak, you know, kind of getting it together. She switched to a new camp where she's seemed to regain a new focus. This is a really interesting fight.
A good scrap. I think the matchmaking goes along the similar theme of a more developed veteran is taking on an up and comer. You have JoJo that has been there. I think she was a tough competitor. She's fought a couple of tough matches. Herself has been a bit of a up and down as far as careers. Yeah, she's taken on a very tough up and comer in Cynthia Calvillo, who is 5-0 and is coming off of an impressive win against Pearl Gonzalez in her last fight.
I agree, man. Calvillo has been super impressive in the UFC, and Joanne Calderwood also on her own little streak prior to her last loss. It's a good fight, man. It's a damn good fight. I'm favoring Cynthia Calvillo to win, but I'm expecting Calderwood to put up a good fight, and I wouldn't be shocked if she finds a way to victory in this one.
I think this is Calvillo's toughest test as far as competition goes. And I don't know, man. It's a 50-50 fight for me. I think you have to look at how they're coming into this fight, the preparation, how the weight cut goes. I would slightly favor the newcomer as well, but I don't be surprised if JoJo pulls off an upset here. And I don't know what the lines look like. I don't know if it would be an upset or not.
I agree, and you're right. The lines have not been posted yet, so we're just kind of going off of guessing. I think Cynthia Calvillo will probably be a 3-1 type favorite, but I'm not counting Calderwood out, man. She does have a really vast Muay Thai game that she's had for years, you know, and now she's developing to her takedown defense. I think Sylvia Calvillo holds a huge advantage in her heart, her intensity, and just her willingness to grapple. She's a much better grappler, I think, and she has a willingness to make the fight uncomfortable. She gets her opponent into a lot of compromising positions, and she's really quick. She's quick, and that helps her a lot in her fights. And I think the quickness more than anything is going to stifle Calderwood.
Definitely questions remain to be answered as far as Cynthia, and I think JoJo Calderwood is a great matchup to get some answers and see where Cynthia is.
Yeah, and I fully agree with you that this is her toughest test in the UFC so far.
Yeah, Zhenya, it should be a pretty scrappy co-main. Moving into the main event, Gunny Nelson is fighting Santiago Ponzinibbio.
This is a fun fight, man. What I'm a little bit surprised about is it's a dangerous fight for Gunnar Nelson. You know, he's been on a really impressive streak. He's finally reached the top 10. However, with that being said, I mean, this is a high risk, low reward type fight for him. But he seems to do really well against guys like Ponzinibbio who give everybody else in the division trouble. Because, and as we talked about prior to this podcast, me and you had a little discussion on this, you have to be aware of his grappling when you fight him. Damian Maia was not worried, and therefore he had an easy victory. You know, he was able to kind of big brother him in the grappling. But to everybody else, he's kind of their Damian Maia, you know?
Yeah, man. I think this is a dangerous fight for him. I don't think he, other than respect, he doesn't have much to gain from this fight, and I have respect for him there because, you know, he is taking on a very scrappy opponent in Ponzinibbio. He's riding a 4-win streak against Nordin Taleb, Zach Cummings, Court McGee's in there, so definitely no slouch. Gane, on the other hand, is on a whole nother level as far as his jiu-jitsu game goes. And, you know, he just is able to dismantle most of his opposition, unless you are Damian Maia, like you said. So, good fight. I think he's doing it to stay busy, to continue building his resume, and continue making a case for top of the division. I think he learned a lot from that Maia fight.
I agree, man. This Ponzinibbio guy, though, he's a very experienced fighter, man. 24 wins, 3 losses. Like you said, he's coming off of some really impressive wins over good guys like Nordin Talib, and he's got a really good striking game. I wouldn't be shocked if he holds the striking advantage over Nelson. But what people sleep on a lot with Gunnar Nelson, rather, is he's a pretty good karate stylist himself. Do I think that Santiago's probably going to be the better striker in this fight? Yeah, probably so. But do I think Gunnar Nelson's going to cause his own problems in the striking? Yeah, I think so as well. However, I am favoring Gunnar Nelson a little bit in this fight just because, like you said, man, his jiu-jitsu is nuts. He's got a really good submission game. When he applies the submissions, he pretty much knows he's got them locked up, and he's able to finish his opponents pretty quickly when he wraps up the sub. Good fighter overall, man. I always enjoy Gunnar Nelson fights, and despite it being a dangerous fight for him, it's a fun fight for us fans.
For sure. And just to speak on some of his accolades, he is a black belt in Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. He is also a black belt in karate, which, to go back on, he does have striking experience, and he won't need to use it offensively per se, but it will help him gauge the distance of his opponent and definitely help him set up for a takedown, which is his realm and where he wants to be ultimately. That's what I'm thinking.
I agree, and I imagine he's probably going to be the crowd favorite in Scotland. I know he's an Icelandic fighter, and Ponzinibbio is an Argentine. But I have a hard time not seeing the crowd being behind Gunnar Nelson. He's a real crowd favorite.
Yeah, just to swim over the pond and you're there to see him fight.
It's true. It sounds like we have a real fun fight card in Scotland this weekend. Also on that card, the interesting fighters like Brett Johns, like we said, David Timor's brother, Pantojo's back, Danny Roberts versus Bobby Nash should be a really good fight. This is the first time I'm going to favor Khalil Roundtree, I think, Dima, in a fight. I'm going to favor him over the Bear Jew Paul Craig. And Jack Marshman's got a real good striking game that I'm excited to see again. So I remember earlier we said we didn't know as many of the undercard fighters, but there are some good, exciting undercard fights on here. I wasn't trying to crap on the event by any means.
Yeah, and this fight night 113 is, despite being low key, it has potential to be a really great fight card. So, moving into our next segment, we're going to briefly talk about some news and talking points we have that accumulated over this week before we bring this thing to a close. So, real quick, the first point, Courtney Casey, who has been going through somewhat of a controversial series of events here with the banning of the USADA, the Texas Athletic State Commission. There's finally some good news to share. She gets her win reinstated, and the Texas Athletic State Commission backs on her fine. What did they do? Ban her?
I'm not sure if she got back pay. Is that what you're saying? Back pay for the fine?
Well, did the State Athletic Commission ruled like they banned?
I know she got her win reinstated versus Jessica Aguilar.
Exactly.
She got her name kind of thrown in the mud by USADA. They gave kind of a half-assed apology.
No. USADA never had an issue with her. USADA always defended her.
Oh, it was the Athletic Commission?
Exactly.
Oh, and from what I gathered, the B sample came up. And the reason that the process they didn't really apologize for what happened. They apologized for the process taking so long. They didn't really apologize for dragging her name in the mud, making people believe that she's an abuser of drugs and, she cheats. When in reality, her B sample showed that she didn't even really have any testosterone enhancement and she was at normal levels. So they kind of jumped the gun with that. They didn't really apologize. And you're right. It was the Athletic Commission and not the USADA this time. However, it's tough for Courtney Casey. It's nice to see her reinstated. I'm not sure if she lost any money, Dima, and how that works, if she gets back pay or not. But hopefully fans will realize, what really happened here and that she's not a cheater, and that she didn't like even Cyborg example. This doesn't follow along the same lines. Like Cyborg actually took something to but she got a medical exemption. In this case, Casey didn't even take anything, and her name was still thrown through the mud as Cyborg's was.
Yeah, I mean the athletic commission here completely fudged the situation, and I don't want to drag on about it for too long, but it's good to see some justice, finally come, and hopefully she's able to get all her money, and there's not a lot of fallout as far as like sponsorships and concerned and things like that.
I agree, and I don't think it will be. I just think for her it's lost time. But as she showed in her last fight, she's really against Jessica Aguilar, the one that was reinstated. She's shown a real improvement. She's really in there to compete against the best girls in the world now, and it's nice to see her back without her name tarnished. Moving right ahead, I know we didn't write this down on our notes, but I feel like it's nice. I just remembered it actually while we were talking. It's nice to update the fans. A couple weeks ago, we said that Matt Hughes was in a bad accident. He has been taken off the ventilator, and he is doing a little bit better. So prayers still out to Matt Hughes that he gets better.
Good news. He's recovering.
That is good news.
Indeed. Next, we wanted to announce a fight. We have a fight coming up, a rematch in the light heavyweight division. OSP and Shogun 2 was announced for UFC Fight Night 117 this upcoming September.
Yeah, that goes down September 23rd at the Saitama, Japan. And this isn't really a fight that people were clamoring for. Like, oh, I really want to see the rematch between OSP Shogun. However, OSP did win their first one. He won in brutal fashion. He was able to use his athleticism. OSP is coming off of a victory, and Shogun is coming off of two, I believe. With that being said, I think this fight is a little bit just like last time. I think OSP is going to be a little bit more athletic, a little bit better, and a little bit more diverse for Shogun at this stage. Not saying Shogun in his prime wouldn't, handle OSP pretty handily. But at this point in their careers, I feel OSP is a better fighter. Nevertheless, this is a good fight people weren't necessarily clamoring for, but a good fight that's high up the card.
I get it, though. You're putting Shogun in Japan, and he's got quite a big fan following there coming off of his Pride days. So it makes sense. Now, whether this matchup, part two, I don't know. It'll be rough. Hopefully, it doesn't go down the same way. It's a little bit more competitive this time. But OSP is a beast, and Rua has seen his share of battles.
Yeah, and this is a rematch of a 2014 fight, actually. So it has been a little while, man. It's been almost 3 years. And Shogun's looked pretty good lately, but granted against not as good competition as OSP. Like, I believe his last win was versus Guyan Volante. Is that accurate?
Yeah. So,
impressive win nevertheless for Shogun, and he was able to really show some flashes of old Shogun. But like you said, I don't think he's got it in him to beat an OSP anymore.
Maybe he'll get the old pride spirit from the Japanese crowd and just go berserk and go old shooter box style and surprise us.
This is true, man. Shogun's got to feel good about fighting in Japan where he's a legend, and the crowd's going to be heavy behind him and booing every move OSP does and highly cheering every hit that Shogun lands.
Well, I don't think they'll be booing anything. I think, if anything, the Japanese crowd is
That's
very
true.
respectful and quiet.
I'm thinking of Texas, maybe. The Japanese is actually my favorite crowd, and you're right, man. I kind of missed the boat on that right there. They are a very quiet, respectful group, and they'll applaud probably even OSP. So I was wrong. Thanks for correcting me on that. Yeah, man, that's a good crowd there in Japan.
So one last little bit of news, and I know you're excited to talk about this.
Yeah, man. How about those promos last night, man? They were really fun, and especially the one I really wanted to highlight with you, DC versus John Jones. Was that the best promo UFC's ever done?
That was, well, I don't think the best. I really liked the lead up to Holly Holm and Ronda Rousey. I think that was one of the best
That was good.
promotional pieces they've done. But yeah, WME being an entertainment company is definitely pulling some strings here, and like this almost WWF esque type promo that aired here with the murky past of John Jones coming up and DC being the champion that needs to prove himself in this one and only fight. Yeah, man, I think it was a really great piece of promotional material.
Yeah, despite just like in a media sense of them finding like those clips that I thought was really nicely pieced together, I think that this brings a lot of attention and draws a lot of eyes to a product that was already a lot of people were real excited about. Man, a lot of real MMA fans are already behind this fight. But what was interesting is that promo captured the attention of people that aren't really as into MMA, but they're like, oh man, this has a backstory. This is like a show I see on TV. My hat's off to UFC team. They did a really good job. And as I highlighted a little bit earlier, I'm really impressed with the WIMG's media relations. Just the way that they handle media, the way that some of the excitement, even like some of the stuff that I didn't understand at first. Like, to be honest, I was never a fan of the interim titles, Dima. I thought that was kind of stupid stuff, a little bit silly, a little bit overused, and devalues the belt. But now I completely get it from WIMG, because what they're doing is they're trying to create a show and put on a show. So if they got that interim title, not only do they have something at the top of the bill that casuals get more excited over, but at the same time, they create a clear number one. Like after last night, you couldn't deny Whitaker to fight Michael Bisping. You know, that's the interim. You could, even if Gegard goes out there and just annihilates his next opponent, just looks like a world beater. He's not going to jump Robert Whitaker. And that's kind of why I started to appreciate these interim titles, even though it's a little bit overplayed.
I think it's a little bit played out, but it was good for this middleweight division in the sense that it clearly needed to happen. You had a line of contenders, and progress needed to be made because things were being
Draws a line in the sand.
exactly things were being put on hold. So while I'm not for the interim title, in other cases, things needed to move along here in middleweight. As far as this promo is concerned, it's an interesting and unique angle. I was more going for like the number one and the two of the division, but this creates more of like the redemption angle, whereas the DC is kind of taking like the proving I need to prove myself kind of a approach. So it's interesting. The promotional piece, the video itself got me hype. So yeah, the 214 is looking stacked as ever. The fight that was supposed to happen here, Robbie Lawler and Cowboy is on featured on this card as well.
Yeah, just adding a real level of excitement to what was already, like you said, a very strong 214 card. My only criticism of that specific promo is it was kind of the John Jones story. It was the John Jones redemption story, and I'm not sure DC would probably be too happy if he saw that promotion, how little he was involved in it. But it is kind of the story of this fight, and it makes it a real interesting and intriguing fight. It is kind of John Jones' redemption story, and Daniel Cormier is, in my opinion, his nemesis, and in most people's eyes, his nemesis.
Like you said, it'll get the casuals involved. It poses a interesting and clickbait-ish type of exposure. But for us hardcores, it's a clear number one and number two matchup in the division, and this is what we're really looking forward to.
Yeah, you were impressed with another promo they did, right? During the same card.
No, I wasn't impressed. by that. It didn't really make sense. They were talking
You're
about...
talking about the Yoel one? I must have missed that one. The
It
Yoel,
followed up
Bisping,
right
and
afterwards.
Whitaker, the one prior to their fight? That's what you're talking about?
Yeah, the one hyping up that one. It made a little bit less sense because they were like, after all this time, Michael Bisping is finally the middleweight champion. Awkward pause. Now Yoel Romero and Robert Whitaker are going to fight for interim fight. I was like, what?
Yeah,
That was a transition.
they were doing a lot of their lead-up TV play, which kind of pushing for a future fight. And, I mean, like you said in last week, actually, you said it's kind of what UFC does. You know, they're always building for that next fight. So they had planned, but Bisping there tearing up the flag and hopping in there. Like I said, I can't really comment on that promotion too much, but that does sound a little weird, you know. But the truth of the matter is, Bisping wanted a bigger fight, one with more money, is why he accepted GSP. A guy that's never really been scared to fight anybody in his life. I think it's unfair that a lot of people are calling him coward and stupid stuff like that. But yeah, all that was after the fight was promotion. I completely agree with Bisping throwing the belt. And I think WIMG, if you want to pat them on the back or give them any accolades, the one thing that they do really well is promotion.
Indeed. Good at promotion, providing your in company's good graces. If you're a guy like DJ, you might not be getting promoted as much.
Yeah, I agree, and hopefully we get in good graces with the Shoot the Ones listeners, man. But we don't really care. We're gonna keep doing this. I mean, let me rephrase that. We do care. We do care. We want you guys to listen. You know, we put a lot of effort into making a good show for you guys.
Yeah, and we're open to criticism provided that it's constructive, and we're always looking to improve. We're 21 episodes deep.
I agree, and part of the reason we've had such growth is due to the constructive criticism we've received. You know, we've received a lot of good criticism over our time.
Not only that, but passion. Lots of passion for fighting, for mixed martial arts, for UFC, Bellator, all of these events that are coming up. And MMA has really grown over the last 10 years. So we're at a point of where we see pretty much a weekly event. So it's great to see the sport where it's at. It's growing. It's bigger than it's ever been. And, we're just glad to be here doing a podcast for you folks. So catch us on our platforms. We can be found on SoundCloud, YouTube, iTunes, Stitcher, MMApodcast.com, and anywhere else where major podcasts can be found.
Yeah, Dima, this has been a great growing process, and like you said, man, doing a podcast is a lot of fun. We want to thank all the listeners for joining us again for this episode 21. It was a lot of fun because we had a lot of great fights this weekend, which always leads to a very exciting podcast for us. We just want to tell you thank you for joining us, and
Dima and Jenya out.